My name is Renata Coville. I'm 38 years old, and I want to tell you about the Sunday I sat in a church conference room and watched my ex-husband's face go completely still. Not with guilt, not with shame, but with the specific blankness of a person who has just run out of story to tell. There was a laptop open on the table, a wall-mounted screen, and 4 minutes and 22 seconds of security footage that he did not know existed. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because before that moment, before the screen lit up and the room went quiet in a way that I will never forget as long as I live, there were months of something I don't quite have the right word for. It wasn't just pain. It was the particular experience of standing in a room full of people who used to know you and feeling them not quite look at you the same way and having no idea what you're supposed to do about that. Knowing something is wrong, but not being able to point at the exact wound. That's where I want to start, because if I just told you about the footage, you wouldn't understand what it meant. You have to understand what the weeks before it felt like first. I have been a member of Grace Fellowship Community Church for 12 years. I joined before my marriage. I stayed through all 8 years of it. And when Derek and I divorced 19 months ago, the one thing I said to myself, the one line I held was, I am not leaving my church. He can have a lot of things. He already took a lot of things. He cannot have that. So I stayed. And for a while, it was fine. He didn't come back to the congregation right away. I had my pew, my small group, my Wednesday morning coffee with Marlinda Osei, who has run the women's ministry at Grace Fellowship for longer than I've been alive. I had my daughter Lily sitting beside me on Sundays, coloring in her bulletin insert with whatever pen she could fish out of my bag. I had something that felt carefully like peace. And then Derek came back. I grew up in Macon, Georgia, the middle daughter of 3 girls. My dad, Roy, worked the floor at a textile plant and coached youth softball on the weekends. My mom, Glenda, cleaned houses on the north side of the county and sang in the church choir every Sunday without fail. Same second row spot, same white cardigan, same absolute conviction that the Lord heard her specifically when she hit that high note in How Great Thou Art. I say that with love. I mean every word of it with love. Our house was not an unhappy house, but it was a quiet one emotionally. The kind of house where love was expressed by doing things for people, not by saying things to them. My dad fixed your bicycle. My mom left a plate in the microwave. Nobody sat you down and asked how you were feeling. You showed up, you helped, you kept the peace, and that was how you said, I love you. I learned early that keeping the peace was its own form of devotion. I absorbed it so completely that by the time I was an adult, I had almost no instinct for self-advocacy. I knew how to manage a room. I knew how to de-escalate. I knew how to read what someone needed before they asked. What I did not know how to do was stand up in the middle of a situation and say, this is hurting me and it has to stop. And if you've ever grown up in a home where being the easy one was the highest compliment anyone ever paid you, where you understood that your needs were negotiable in a way that other people's needs weren't, then I think you already understand where this story is going. If this is already sitting in your chest a little, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, so you're here when the rest of this comes out. And share it with someone who needs to hear they're not alone in this. Because I think there are more of us than people realize. Now let me keep going. I have one specific memory from childhood that I come back to more than any other. I was 11 years old. my oldest sister Darlene shoplifted a lipstick from a drugstore we had walked to together, though I had been waiting outside on the sidewalk. When the manager pulled Darlene into the office, someone brought me in too. I sat in a plastic chair while Darlene cried and confessed, and the manager eventually let us both go. But the store owner called my father, and my father came home that evening and punished both of us equally, because he said that silence in the presence of wrongdoing was the same as participating in it. I was 11. I had done nothing. I was on the sidewalk. But I did not argue with him. I went to my room and I sat on my bed and I made a decision, without fully understanding I was making it, that I would spend the rest of my life being so transparently, demonstrably good that no one could ever mistake me for guilty again, that no one could ever look at me and have a reasonable doubt. I carried that decision for 27 years without ever examining it. I just lived by it. I paid my own way through Mercer University, partial scholarship, federal loans, paid them off over 9 years. I went into social work because I wanted to fix broken systems for people who couldn't fix them alone. I built a career that I am genuinely proud of. I manage a caseload of families in crisis. I supervise 2 caseworkers. My boss has nominated me for regional awards twice. I am the person people call when a situation feels impossible. And when I married Derek Coville at 27, I genuinely believed that our shared faith meant shared values. That a man who showed up to church fundraisers and quoted scripture and looked you in the eye when he shook your hand was a man you could trust. I know how that sounds now. I know. But I want you to understand that I was not naive. I was hopeful. And those are not the same thing. The marriage was not violent. It was not dramatic in the ways people sometimes expect when they hear the word divorce. What it slowly, consistently was a long education in having my reality gently reframed. Derek was very good at that. He had a way of taking something that had just happened and explaining it back to me in a version that was slightly different from what I had experienced, and doing it so calmly, so reasonably, that I would spend the next hour wondering if maybe I'd misremembered. It took me years to understand that was a pattern. It took me even longer to understand it was intentional. My younger sister, Becca, understood it before I did. Becca is 4 years younger than me, and she is built entirely differently than I am. Where I manage rooms by going quiet, Becca manages rooms by saying the exact thing that everyone else in the room is thinking, but hasn't said yet. She has never been the easy one in any situation in her life. And she considers this a character strength, which, honestly, it is. Becca never liked Derek. She told me so once, early in our relationship, and I asked her not to say it again. And she respected that for 8 years. 8 years of biting her tongue at Christmas dinners and birthday parties and church events, watching him work the room, watching him become everyone's favorite version of himself, watching me get smaller and not being able to say it because I had asked her not to. When I finally called her the night I told Derek I wanted a divorce, she was quiet for a long time. And then she said very carefully, "I have been waiting for this call for 6 years. Tell me what you need." That is who Becca is. After the divorce, she was the person who came over on the hard nights, who showed up with takeout when I didn't have the bandwidth to cook, who sat at my kitchen table while Lily slept down the hall and let me talk until I ran out of words. She never once said, "I told you so." She understood that was not the kind of love I needed. And it was Becca who first said the sentence that I kept coming back to in the weeks before everything broke open. She said, "Renata, he is not over losing. He is not going to be gracious about losing. And you need to stop expecting him to be." I heard her. I just didn't understand yet what losing looked like for Derek. I didn't understand the specific shape it was going to take or where he was going to take it. I found out on a Tuesday evening in a fellowship hall lit by someone's battery candles when Marlinda Osei touched my arm after a women's ministry meeting and said very quietly, "You might want to talk to Pastor Achebe. There are conversations happening that I think you deserve to be part of." I drove home. I sat in my driveway for a long time with the engine off and the windows up. And then I called Becca. Estamos na parte 2 agora, exatamente onde a história começa a virar de vida reconstruída para a velha história sendo reescrita contra você. Aqui você vai acompanhar como o silêncio se torna campanha, como Renata percebe que está sendo julgada sem ter voz e como o primeiro tremor de prova aparece antes do ponto final, a evidência que muda tudo. A parte 2 é o longo mergulho no conflito, quando o risco social vira pessoal e a protagonista, mesmo estável, digna, funcionando, sente o chão se mover debaixo dela. Abaixo. Parte 2. 1.500 a 1.750 palavras. Escrita como script pronto para narração, seguindo o mesmo estilo íntimo, vivo e detalhado. The ride home from church that Tuesday night felt like I was moving through water. Not dramatic water, not storm surge, just the particular resistance of a world that had subtly changed directions while I wasn't watching. I sat in my driveway for 11 minutes before I could make myself go inside. My hands stayed on the steering wheel until they stopped shaking. Then I took a breath, the kind you take when you're trying to remind your body that it's safe, and walked up the sidewalk to my front door. Lily was upstairs, already showered, already half asleep, except for the last flicker of her consciousness, where she still looks at the world like it might solve itself if she just waited long enough. She called out, "Mom?" And I forced my voice into that familiar shape. "I'm here, sweetheart, just tired." What I didn't say? I'm tired in a way that makes me feel like someone just turned the room around and forgot to tell me. Inside, I turned on the kitchen light and set my keys down with a sound that felt heavier than keys should feel. I opened the refrigerator. I stared at it like it was a puzzle that used to be easy. Milk, eggs, leftovers, normal, ordinary. It's the ordinary things that betray you when your mind is occupied elsewhere. They look the same, but they don't feel safe anymore. Then my phone rang. I didn't jump. I didn't even startle. My body had already moved into that alert, disciplined posture it takes when something important is happening. I looked at the screen. Becca. I answered before the second ring. "Renata," she said, and there was no preamble. Becca doesn't waste time. What happened? I explained it. Marlinda's touch on my arm, the sentence delivered with such gentleness, it felt almost like the church was apologizing for the very atmosphere it had created. the words that weren't said, the quiet that followed too quickly. Becca let me finish. Then she said, with the absolute directness that sometimes hurts and sometimes saves, "They are talking about you. People talk. You know that. You manage situations for a living." "I know," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to, but I don't know what they're saying. That was the acid truth of it. I could feel the pressure. I could sense the shift. I could see the half glances, the conversation that stops when I enter the fellowship hall. But I didn't actually know the story they were telling. Because the story people tell when they don't like you isn't just words. It's a reconstruction of your life. Over the next 48 hours, the reconstruction arrived in fragments. It started with Dolores, the retired librarian, kind, well-meaning, charmingly oblivious. She called me on Wednesday morning in the middle of my first supervisory check-in with 2 junior caseworkers. I took the call in the hallway, stepping away from the office door as quietly as I could. "Renata, honey," Dolores said, and her voice was careful. "I just wanted to say, if you ever need someone to listen, I'm here. I hear there are some concerns being raised." "What kind of concerns?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. This is the work I do professionally. Ask questions without confirming fear. "Oh, nothing dramatic," Dolores said, as if she could will it into nothing. "Just your health mainly. People worry. You know how people are." My throat tightened. "I appreciate that," I said, "but everything is fine." After I hung up, I stood in the hallway for a moment, letting the air cool my cheeks. Health. That was the first layer. By Thursday afternoon, it had become something sharper. A voice message from a woman in my small group. "Renata, I just wanted to check if you're doing okay. I know family matters can get heavy. If you ever need help, I'll be praying for you." It landed like a diagnosis delivered at a distance. By Friday, it had stopped being private and started being active. Someone at Grace Fellowship knew how to get people to listen. Someone had learned exactly which buttons to push. That someone was Derek. I know the shape of narrative management because I've seen it at work. A client tells a social worker one version, and an employer tells another, and suddenly the story is not about what happened, it's about who can speak with the loudest moral tone. Derek had that tone. People trusted it. He had always had it. He'd been quietly rebuilding his standing at church for months. He'd come back after the divorce, not with an apology, but with a presence, greeting the elders after service, lingering, shaking hands, taking people aside at just the right moment. It read as quiet humility to most people. It reads to me now as something else entirely, positioning. Becca came over that night. She did not raise her voice. She set her things on the table, leaned against the counter, and said, "Renata, he's using the church like a courtroom. He knows exactly what he's doing." "I know," I said, and the words felt thin. "I just don't know what he's saying." Becca looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "He is telling them you have a drinking problem. He is telling them you're financially unstable. He is telling them you're not fit to be Lily's primary caregiver." The kitchen air seemed to change. The ordinary sounds of the house, the refrigerator hum, the heater cycling, became a thin, hostile silence. "How do you know that?" I asked. "Because people talk, and some of those people still feel guilty," Becca said. "And the guilty ones tell the truth sooner than the loyal ones." I sat down. My body moved to the chair like it had made the decision for me. My hands began to tremble again, but it wasn't panic. It was something older. The childhood feeling of being misread in a room full of adults who already believe they understand what kind of girl I am. And then I did the thing I always do when I'm overwhelmed. I stopped, I breathed, and I got to work. Because I also know this: accusations, if they are going to destroy you, only succeed if you react emotionally in the exact way the accuser predicts. If Derek could make me look unstable, then people would measure my reputation against his presentation. If he could make me look defensive, then people would conclude I had something to hide. I had documentation, quiet proof, boring proof, the proof of a life lived with consistency. Lily's school attendance. My performance reviews at work, neatly filed at home. The fact that I had voluntarily been in counseling since the divorce. Not because I was broken, but because I knew what trauma can do if you don't treat it with respect. I had those papers. I had the record of an organized life. I collected them into a manila folder the next evening. I did it slowly, like I was putting something into evidence. The phlegmatic, practical part of me, the social worker, took over. Whatever else this was, it was a case. And if it was a case, then it needed facts. When the folder was ready, I set it down on my kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. Then I called Pastor Achebe. His office phone rang. He answered after the second ring, his voice measured, warm, controlled. "Renata," he said, "how can I help you?" "I know conversations are happening about me," I said. I kept my voice calm. "I don't know the specifics. I don't want to assume harm before I verify it. But I need my place in this community clarified. I need you to hear both sides, not just the side that's being told louder." There was a pause, a long pause. The kind that means he is weighing words carefully instead of speaking fast to soothe. "I hear you," he said, "and you are right to ask for that. I have heard things. I don't know what to believe yet. I think that's the right posture for me. But I want you to know I take this seriously. It wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't protection. It was caution. And I understand why. He did not want to be impulsive. He did not want to break unity prematurely. He wanted to be a pastor, not a judge." But as I hung up, the feeling in my chest was not relief. It was the old familiar one. The sense that I was on trial in a room I wasn't in with witnesses who hadn't asked me what happened. Then, late on Friday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered anyway. It was Marlinda Osei. "Renata," she said quietly, and her voice had the particular tenderness of a woman who is about to tell you something that will hurt you less than it shows. "I have read a written request Derek sent to the church office. He is asking for a meeting with the elders. He is raising concerns about your fitness as a parent." My breath stopped. For a full second, my body seemed to forget how to exhale. "Are you sure?" I asked, even though I knew she was. "Yes," she said. He framed it as a pastoral care issue. "I have a copy. I'm sending it to you. I didn't want you to hear it through someone else first." When I opened the email in my car during my lunch break, the words, written so cleanly, so reasonably, felt like someone placing a document on a table in a courtroom. It read with the same practiced moral seriousness that had once convinced me he was sincere. It suggested instability. It suggested consequence. It suggested intervention. I read it a third time. Then I called Becca. "I am going," she said immediately. "Tell me the date and the time." The meeting was set for Sunday after the morning service. I spent the rest of the week preparing what I would say and, more importantly, what I wouldn't say. I wouldn't argue his motives. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't tell the story of our marriage like a grievance. I would let the facts speak. Because by then, I had something else too. Not yet evidence in the hands of the people who mattered, but a sense of it. A sense that someone had been watching. A sense that there was a record. And if you've ever been in a room where someone is rewriting your entire life and you know that truth exists because it has to exist somewhere, if you've ever felt that slow exhale that comes when you realize you don't have to shout because the proof is already on its way, I think you'll understand what that felt like. If this is starting to resonate, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been judged by people who had no idea what they were judging? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And when you're done, let me keep going because the part that comes next is the one I wish I could rewrite for myself. Sunday came with the particular quiet force that only churches can have. The way sunlight moves across stained glass, the way hymn books smell when they've been held by hands for years, the way coffee tastes the same every week because the urn has been the same since the earliest days of Grace Fellowship. I dressed carefully. The dusty sage green wrap dress with the faint floral print, my cognac block heels, the gold chain with the small cross pendant I've worn since I was 16. I pinned back the front strands of my hair. Then I took the clip out again after a few minutes and let it fall loose. I didn't look undone. I looked like someone who was done trying to arrange herself for approval. In my bag, the manila folder, organized, labeled, unhurried. Attendance records for Lily. My performance reviews at work, neatly typed and dated. The letter from my therapist confirming that I'd chosen voluntary counseling after the divorce to care for my own mental health, because Derek had been careful not to say treatment plainly, instead letting people hear what they wanted to hear. I got to the sanctuary early. I slipped into my usual pew. Lily slid in beside me and immediately busied herself with the bulletin insert, using my pen to draw tiny suns and moons and smiley faces along the margins. She looked up at me once, her eyes wide and slightly tired, and I squeezed her hand. "Everything's okay," I whispered, and I did not lie. I meant it. Derek arrived just before the opening prayer. He wore charcoal gray slacks and a crisp white shirt rolled at the forearms, a performance of decency, as if dressing simple proved he had nothing to hide. He greeted people with that practiced warmth. He shook hands. He smiled. He looked to most of the room like a man doing his best under difficult circumstances. After the service, people filtered out toward the rear doors in that familiar pattern. Clumps of conversation, greetings, someone redirecting the flow of traffic toward the coffee line. Some people avoided my eyes entirely. Others nodded too quickly, too formally. I could feel the difference as clearly as you can feel a temperature drop. The meeting had been framed as pastoral care, a conversation, a shared effort toward wisdom. That was how Derek wrote it. That was how the church office scheduled it. It meant the room would contain Pastor Leonard Achebe, 3 deacons, Marlinda Osei, and both Derek and me. Becca was not on the list. She had not been invited. She had parked in the lot and stepped out just to make sure I wasn't walking into something alone. When we reached the conference room, she followed me inside without waiting to be asked. The door clicked closed behind her. She took her place against the back wall, arms folded, mouth set. Not threatening, just present. A reminder that I had someone. The deacons took their seats. Pastor Achebe sat at the far end of the table, reading glasses on, his Bible near at hand. Marlinda Osei took her place with the practiced authority of someone who has presided over more meetings than most would ever guess. Her silver white hair was shaped carefully. Her deep plum church suit did not move. Derek sat near the center, posture easy, prepared, measured. He looked like a man in pain who is determined to be mature. Pastor Achebe cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was slow, deliberate. This is a conversation meant to clarify concerns that have surfaced, not to assign blame before we've heard both accounts. Renata, would you begin by sharing your understanding of what's been said? I opened my folder. I placed it down in the middle of the table. I don't know exactly what's been said, I began, and I kept my voice controlled. I know enough to understand that I'm being described in a way that does not match the day-to-day life I live with my daughter. I know people are using phrases like instability and unfit and health concerns. Those words spread quickly. They don't leave room for nuance. Derek's eyes flicked toward the folder, then back at me, calm. "Renata," he said, and there was that particular tone, the one that reads as empathetic if you don't know better. "I'm not trying to damage you. I am trying to be honest about what I've seen and fear for Lily." A pause moved through the room. The word fear landed carefully. Fear is moral currency. People cannot argue with fear without seeming unloving. Pastor Achebe nodded slightly, not in agreement, in moderation. "Go on, Derek." Derek leaned forward with an expression of reluctance. "Since the divorce, her behavior has changed," he said. "There have been difficulties managing schedules. There have been repeated moments where her calm has seemed strained. I've been worried about her relationship with alcohol. I've seen the impact it can have on her consistency. I'm bringing this out of concern, not spite." The deacons shifted. Not visibly dramatic, but enough to suggest they were listening closely. In that shift, the danger spread. One sentence like that, spoken in the right frame, becomes fact in many people's minds. I could feel the room reorganize again. Marlinda's eyes narrowed slightly. She did not speak yet. I did what I've done in every difficult professional case I've ever handled. I refused to argue against a narrative with emotion alone. I straightened the documents inside the folder and said, "Here is Lily's attendance record from the last complete school term. Stable, consistent. Here are my performance reviews at work. Dated, thorough, showing reliability over time. Here is a letter from my therapist stating that I have been in voluntary counseling since the divorce to support my own mental health as I rebuild my life. This is not a crisis. This is not hidden harm. This is care." Derek's mouth tightened. "That doesn't account for what I've seen personally," he said, "for the decisions that don't show on paper." At that exact moment, the back door opened. Becca stepped forward, not with drama, not with shouting, but with the unmistakable directness that tells everyone in the room they are no longer in a polite conversation. Before this goes any further, she said, looking directly at Derek, does anyone in this room know that Derek filed a motion in family court 3 months ago to reduce his child support payments? Because I do, and I have the filing. The air changed. Not a shout, not panic, a quiet, sharp recalibration. One of the deacons turned his head slightly. Pastor Achebe's gaze sharpened. Marlinda's expression became very still. Derek spoke very carefully. That is not relevant to... It is relevant, Becca said, because you are standing here telling these people my sister is not fit to care for her own child while trying to pay less to support that child. Those two things are relevant to each other. Pastor Achebe raised one hand, not to silence Becca, but to slow the room. Before we continue, he said, I need to show everyone something. He stood and walked to the wall-mounted screen near the window. He connected his laptop. The meeting had been quiet. Now it became suspended. The footage began to play. Grace Fellowship installed security cameras 4 months ago after a minor vandalism incident in the parking lot. The cameras cover the exterior of the building, the foyer, and the corridor outside the main fellowship hall. Derek had spoken to 2 deacons in that corridor on a Sunday after service, confident that he was among trusted listeners, confident that the setting was private. He did not know the camera was there. The video showed him clearly. The audio carried every word. In it, Derek told both deacons that my drinking has gotten worse since I started bringing Lily to this church, that he had found bottles in my car more than once, and that he was not trying to damage my reputation, but felt spiritually obligated to protect the congregation from someone who may not be what she presents herself as. It was specific, it was detailed, it was entirely fabricated. The screen went silent. The room went silent. One of the deacons pushed his chair back slightly, as if he needed physical distance from what he had heard. Marlinda set her glasses down on the table, deliberately, without dramatics. Her eyes stayed on Derek. Derek spoke quickly. That footage is out of context. Pastor Achebe said quietly, Derek, please don't. It was not loud. It did not need to be. I did not jump to my feet. I did not demand an apology. I looked at Derek and I knew, with an immediate clarity that makes me shiver even now, that the power he had been wielding, the slow, careful rewriting of my life, had ended. Pastor Achebe walked Derek to the door. There was no verbal explosion. There was just the quiet sentence that matters. The church would be praying, and the matter of Derek's access to pastoral conversations would be considered by the elder board. Derek left. Back inside, Marlinda came to me and put her hand on my shoulder. Not in a speech, just in presence. I sat for a moment longer while the room recalibrated. Then I said, not to the whole room, almost to myself, I just wanted them to know the truth. I wasn't asking for anything more than that. Marlinda said, we know, baby. We know. And at that exact moment, when the truth was finally undeniable and the room had witnessed it, when the lie had run out of air and my life was no longer being rewritten without permission, I felt something I cannot put into words without reducing it. If what you just heard settled in your chest the way it did in mine, hit that like button. It's a small thing, but it means more than you know. because there are people out there who have been standing in rooms like that for weeks, months, years, and they need someone to witness them as clearly as you just witnessed me. Now let me show you what happens after the meeting closes and how a life changes when the truth finally shows up on its own terms. After the meeting ended, the conference room did not stay suspended forever. People stood up, chairs slid back. The camera footage left something behind that cannot be undone. A record that repudiates a carefully told story before anyone can pretend they misunderstood it. Pastor Achebe closed his laptop. His face showed no triumph, only responsibility. "We will talk again," he said. "We will be deliberate, and we will be fair." It was not the dramatic closing statement of a movie pastor. It was the measured language of a man who realized that neutrality, if held too long, becomes complicity. Marlinda walked me out into the hallway. We passed a few parishioners who were milling around after the service, careful hands holding coffee cups too tightly, eyes practicing what they would say now. Marlinda's expression did not falter. She simply leaned close and said, "You didn't perform. You didn't beg. You brought what was true." And then she left me with that sentence like it was a seal on something. Becca followed me out to the parking lot. She didn't rush to congratulate me. She did not turn it into a victory lap. She just took my keys without asking and said, "Get in the passenger seat. I'm driving you home." I got in. On the drive, the silence between sisters felt different. Not tense, not combative. The quiet of release. "He thought he was writing the story," Becca said at last. "He thought everyone would choose the most confident narrator." I nodded. I kept my eyes on the passing trees. "He needed them to," I said, "because if the church believed him, he didn't lose the marriage. He won it by changing what it means." We didn't say much more until we pulled into my driveway. I thanked her. She hugged me, firm, lasting, the kind of hug that tells me she's still angry, but she is choosing to hold me instead. Then she drove off. Inside my house, the air changed again. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but in that first long moment after the front door clicked shut, I realized how quiet it was. Lily was upstairs. I had asked my mother to pick her up after service so I could focus, not in secrecy, but with intention. I climbed the stairs slowly and sat on the edge of her bed. Her eyes opened. She looked at me like she always does, with the instinctive trust of a child who has learned what safe looks like. "Did everything go okay?" she asked. I thought about the best version of truth I could give her. Not the courtroom language, not the accusations. "Some people said things that weren't true about me," I said, and the truth came out. Adults made sure it came out. She nodded. "Okay," she said, and then she turned over and went back to sleep. That word, "okay," carried more weight coming from her than any speech had carried in that conference room. The consequences unfolded over the next several days, and they did not come because I called anyone or demanded anything. They came because Derek's own choices forced the room to clear. Derek stopped coming to Grace Fellowship. He did not show up for the following Sunday service. The church, which had been careful not to rush toward judgment, had also seen the footage, not in theatrical public display, but in the quiet understanding that spreads through a congregation when leadership knows for sure. A few people reached out directly, some with remorse, some with simple clarity. A deacon's wife left a voicemail that began, "Renata, I am so sorry we didn't ask sooner," and ended before I could explain anything away. 2 women from my small group texted. Marlinda made a statement at the next women's ministry meeting. She did not name Derek or detail the cameras, but she acknowledged that misinformation had been used to damage a member of the community, and that Grace Fellowship took responsibility for not moving faster. Most importantly, Derek's attempt to reduce his child support payments unraveled. The motion did not proceed. It did not need to become a public spectacle. It simply stopped. The kind of quiet that tells you someone's leverage collapsed. Still, I did not celebrate. I did not post about it. I did not explain myself to coworkers beyond the simple reality that a personal situation had been resolved and that I was doing well. People talk, but they talk differently when there is less mystery in the air. And what surprised me most was this. For 19 months, I had lived with the idea that if someone ever truly saw me, if someone ever truly understood, I would feel something dramatic. Relief like fireworks. A sudden sense of closure. What I felt instead was something quieter, a settling. Because for years I had carried the childhood lesson. Silence in the face of wrongdoing is participation. And I had responded by trying to eliminate doubt through outward perfection, by keeping the peace, by behaving so purely that no room for misreading could exist. That coping mechanism had saved me in many ways. It also had taught me fear. In that conference room, when the camera footage opened, I did not need to shout. I did not need to prove my character with volume. I only needed the truth to be seen. That realization did not turn me into a new person overnight. It simply gave me back something I had been denying. The knowledge that trust is not something you manufacture alone. Sometimes the people who matter can see you even when you don't know they're looking. 2 days later, I did one final thing, small, intentional, that felt like more of a closing than anything I had done. I wrote a message to Marlinda Ose. It wasn't long. It said, "Marlinda, thank you for believing your eyes. Thank you for not treating a woman's life like a rumor to manage. I don't need anything but the quiet knowledge that you saw it and that it mattered." She sent me back a single line. That is what we are supposed to do. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table. I thought about the footage again, and I thought about Derek's performance, and I thought about what people mistake for strength. For years, I had believed strength meant silence and good behavior. Now I understood. Strength also includes allowing someone to witness you clearly. My name is Renata Coville. I'm 38 years old, and I finally know what it feels like to be exactly where I'm supposed to be. If this story stayed with you, I want to ask you something before you go. Has someone ever quietly protected you in a way you only understood years later? Leave it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you believe that the people who see us clearly are worth holding on to, like this video, subscribe so you don't miss the next story, and share it with someone who needs to hear that they are not invisible.